like to welcome Connie. I know last meeting she was getting some treatment done, and she's been fighting some health stuff. So, Connie, good to see you. So, again, with just reply yes or here as I go down the roll. Sandra Dixon.
Here.
Robin Chadwick.
Here.
Gary Henson.
Here.
Ken Gregoire.
Here.
Monica Murnham. Sarah Kaler. Mike Brower.
Here.
Mike Kage. Keith Rickard. And Jason Hess. Well, thanks for showing up virtually and in person. Jason's representing us well there. Thanks to the staff for getting out and getting us connected. And we will, don't imagine we'll be an hour and a half or so this morning. So we'll just kind of keep moving as we go. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. And those were sent out by Connie earlier in the week. If we'll entertain them for approval.
Move to approve. This is Robin.
And
this is Sandra. I second.
Second by Sandra. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Unanimous approval. We'll look to Chris now for any update or remarks from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No significant updates for this month. I believe we've talked about the Purdue bankruptcy in the past. I'll just flag that the bankruptcy plan was approved, and so we're just working through the stages to get that implemented here in Kansas. Would still not anticipate any kind of payment out of that for the next few months, though when that becomes imminent, I will let you all know. We are getting into annual reporting time for our municipalities, and starting in 2026, we do want to try to improve the way we communicate the actual spending. So I'm going to be working with Krista at Sunflower to try to get that information in kind of a more usable, more user-friendly format. We're going to continue trying to improve that process year over year. Beyond that, I don't think we really have got a whole lot going into the end of the year. I will say that there's still continued interest in finding out when the next round of RFPs will be available. So just know that folks are still paying attention to this project and are interested in knowing when money is going to be available again.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Well, Christmas is coming up, so I imagine they're in the mood to get gifts, whether it's at Christmas time or later on. Well, I think we'll have some reporting today and give maybe a sooner timeline for them. You mentioned having a clearer way to see how we spend our money. Is the local, the cities and counties that are receiving money, and I apologize if that's posted somewhere, is it also available?
Yes, the MFAF information is available. I think that we were still struggling with getting the document actually sent to get posted. We'll get that resolved hopefully before the end of the month for the 2024 annual report, and then that's all. The goal is to get all of that kind of rolled into an easier to interface with report for calendar year 2025 and going forward. And what I mean by that is getting the data in a more accessible form. Right now it's in a PDF spreadsheet or a Excel doc that we share. And so that's all public records. If folks want to request that, we can get it directly to you. But going forward, we'd like to get that into more of a data visualization mode, you know, some kind of either dashboard or whatever term you want to use there to make it a little more accessible, a little more easily interpretable so that folks have a better time of understanding what the cities and counties are actually doing with their dollars.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comment for Chris? Well, moving right along, number 4, more brainstorming. I have appreciated the last 2 or 3 meetings when this has been our main action that we've done to develop going forward. I know not just Chris, but I've heard from people, you know, when we're going to start awarding grants again. And, you know, we're anxious to do that. We are entrusted with these funds, but at the same time, I appreciate taking time to develop a strategy that my hope and wish is that would actually make a difference as we go forward. Spend this money wisely. Not that we haven't spent money wisely so far, but we have this opportunity, I feel, to maybe come up with something that would be not just effective in Kansas, but maybe something that could be looked at across the country. From my own experience, the problem's not getting any better, and maybe we can help make a difference. So thanks to everybody that's taken part in the past, and look forward going forward. I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Krista. And what we wanted to present today is take what has been discussed over the last 2 or 3 meetings in our brainstorming sessions and just start to put a framework around how do we move from a concept stage to actually the implementation stage. So Krista, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, so since the last meeting, we put together some example frameworks for you, and there are 2 different kinds. So you got 2 separate attachments because we're thinking of them in 2 separate ways. So the first attachment was more of kind of a framework for how we might make grant opportunities available and the more logistics and internal processes associated with it that we could use in the future. So it's a more of a grant making style feel. And then the other ones are more specific examples of things that could fall under each of the pillars as potential ways to get funding out the door or funding topics, I guess. But I'm going to pass it to Alyssa to go over all of those.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So like Krista said, we taking in the previous meetings and the different conversations that you guys have been having and kind of the consensus around these pillars that I've been kind of also thinking as funding streams, not to start using all the language, but really there is this consensus that you guys have come to around 3 areas, you know, really wanting to focus on being able to sustain work, scale work, and then catalyze, do that innovation. So what we brought to you today are these frameworks, like Krista said, really trying to just present the way in which you could provide grant opportunities in each of these pillars. I think we were thinking about how this may provide just like some really concrete understanding of how you guys and yourselves could potentially make these decisions and potentially gain information. So looking at, like Krista said, the main file we have here, it begins with Pillar 1. This is an overview of a potential responsive funding program. So each of these pillar documents is set up very similarly. They all have a purpose, core components, example process, and then summary of next steps if the board is interested in moving forward with any of the frameworks. So really the key pieces here to the responsive funding program is, as the board has discussed, this provides the opportunity to remain flexible and nimble to opportunities and not have to wait for RFP cycles the way that the past RFPs have. The thing here that, let me see. The other thing here that is important under core components is the idea that this would be a one-time funding opportunity, recognizing that the conversation around Pillar 1 has really been about sustaining work, filling immediate needs, those urgent needs. And then I just want to point to the process really quick. So recognizing that ideally any requests that you guys would receive under this program would be an immediate or an urgent need, but the process recognizes that there might be some really time-sensitive specific needs compared to those that maybe the board does have the opportunity to ask more questions or to kind of get a little bit more information. So that's where you see that process just divide a little bit, trying to clarify that there potentially could be requests that come in where it is just highly time-sensitive.
We can share the bottom, what we were debating. Do we go through the next steps, which are kind of like questions we'd want the board to discuss if you wanted to move forward in creating a criteria for this, for folks to begin to apply, if you wanted to do an application or if you wanted them to come and present to you. So like things that we still need to discuss, but we do have a request that came in recently that is a perfect example. Whether you are wanting to do anything with that or not today is up to you all, but I thought it was still helpful to share. Pat and I spoke about this previously, that it fits kind of perfectly under this responsive grant making that's time sensitive. So there's a request for a transitional housing capital project that they're requesting $36,949.50 towards their transitional housing units that they are working on for women in recovery from substance use. And that $36,000 by December 31st would unlock matching funds from a Maybe Foundation funding source of $300,000. So regardless of any decision-making or if you wanted to do anything with that, I wanted to share it as an example of that. Seems like a perfect responsive request, in my opinion, of it's time-sensitive, it's not a significantly high number of dollars, and it unlocks $300,000 more dollars. So it's an opportunity to get more dollars to our state or to a project. And so we wanted to share those either way, but I'll pass that back to you, Pat, before we go into any other frameworks, if you want to have any discussion or.
Yeah, I think we'll go on this particular pillar, see if there's thoughts on, limit as far as the funds available, and if there's any other specific things we want to note when we're considering this. And then as far as the specific requests that you gave as an example, if the board wishes to consider this, I've looked at it. It's fit all that we've wanted to do. It is time sensitive. It's a don't want to spring it on anybody. But with that being said, they're doing something that we, at least I've endorsed and much needed, and with the time sensitiveness of the matching grant, it'd be something to talk about anyway. So, I think the first thing is limits. Do we want a funding limit, or do we want to leave it open? I could go either way, or I guess if we have a limit, we could always, as a board, change that if something special came along. So, any comments in that regard?
Chair, this is Mike.
Yes, sir.
My thought on that is, I would suspect it'd be a good idea to put a limit, fully understanding that it can be, the board has the discretion to make decisions otherwise. But I'm curious, I'd like to hear from other board members if the limits that we've used recently are appropriate. Has anyone received any kind of feedback as to, with, the 200 or 300,000, whether that was appropriate or not?
Hi, this is Sandra. I have gotten some feedback just from partners in the business around the state. I think folks are grateful for $300,000, but that really is limiting in projects. Um, Especially now, it's getting more expensive to initiate projects. So I would be open to considering a higher amount, maybe up to, I don't know, $500,000. If we're asking more of people, and I really appreciate what you all have provided to us to review today. We are expecting a bit more of people. So I would be open to a higher amount of money.
Pat, this is Robin. I've had very similar feedback as Sandra that the 2 to 300,000 for some really smaller organizations, that can be a really important piece, but it is pretty limiting as far as what organizations can do with that amount. $200,000 goes really, really quickly in this work. So I too would be in favor of raising that limit.
Thank you. Other comments? Well, I would support that, and it seems, Sandra and Robin, that 500,000 would maybe be a more useful and appropriate number as far as a limit. Any comment in that regard? I will take that.
Sandra, I can support that.
So can I.
Okay. I don't think we need to take action on direction to Krista and Alyssa as they put together kind of a final document. And then if we do take some action on this one that we heard about today, we'll just keep that in mind. I guess it's way below that, but
Yeah, I think that could be that will be helpful for us, and we can come back with example criteria, because ideally we would have something at least on Flux or on the website of kind of what this responsive grant application, or however it ends up going, is, and the different criteria of what's considered, so that we don't just get any and every single project, that it's not exactly what we're talking about under Pillar 1. So we can work on that criteria, and if you guys have any suggestion for that criteria outside of the limits, that would be helpful too, but we can take a stab at it and bring it back to you. You also got in your packet a copy of the responsive grant application that we used for the Attorney General's office, so that we could get it into Flux and start having something consistent. We might end up changing that, and especially if you guys have feedback. But we wanted to, at least when we got that one, have something in the system of what we think a future responsive grant application might include, and so that's where that came from, but could be used as a guide for future ones as well. Yeah, and I guess one question too might be, would you prefer to have written applications and then staff review those applications and bring the ones that fit the criteria to all of you? Or would you want to do a public comment style where anyone and everyone could just come and request dollars from the board, or a combination? Any feedback on those kind of logistics?
I prefer the review by staff and then bringing to us the ones that meet criteria. And again, there might be exceptions as we go forward that you feel, an application that meets 6 out of 7, but it's, hits in the sweet spot. So that's just my opinion.
This is Sandra. I concur with that, Pat. I'd rather have them reviewed first.
I agree. This is Robin.
Okay.
Really quick,
Let's
Pat.
see, Alyssa and Krista, other criteria that you want to ask us about that would give you clear direction?
I think it's more of a logistical question. Curious around thoughts on frequency of hearing the requests. Is there interest in having a standing agenda item? Is it something every 2 months, 3 months? Any thoughts around logistics in terms of staff bringing requests that have been vetted?
Maybe every quarter, with, again, if there's something that's time sensitive, we'll that you feel merits are taking a look at, we can always put it in on the agenda. But if we have a standing every 3 months or so,
I would agree with Pat, but I would certainly want you guys to bring, like this example of trying to hit the maybe 300,000, to bring those, because that really is time urgent.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a perfect mix of strategy there.
and then as far as kind of an overall strategy, you know, from our brainstorming sessions, what has been on my mind, or a takeaway from that is, you know, obviously, how do we make a difference in SUD? But stigma, which I know you note on here, uh, and they kind of go hand in hand, shame and stigma, and then to get to a 1 year recovery plan. Maybe another overarching is the collaboration. You know, if an organization brings forth something where they're going to include 3 other, 13 others, or, you know, just as we go forward, the more collaboration we can encourage. You know,
I think that makes a lot of sense. Some of the ones that we've heard, except for the one today, actually, I think all the other ones that we've heard in the past have come from a state agency recommendation as well. So that was something we were thinking about, how to consider that too, of that kind of collaboration, that the state's already invested in something and it's just kind of not matching, but still something that's supported by the state, like the medical detox example that we heard previously. We're still waiting on what the municipalities locally are going to put dollars towards that project, but that one, KDAD's recommended they come to us. And so we're trying to figure out too what a criteria might look like that, without saying that it needs to go to KDAD's or KDHE or some other state entity first for them to review, which no one's getting paid to do that. So yeah, collaboration for sure, but not exactly, other than partnerships with other organizations, what that looks like, but definitely on our radar, and we'll put that in there.
And then just as along those same lines, I keep thinking that as we go forward, to partner with the local city and counties that are getting some of the same funding, you know, just know that we would be receptive for things that they're doing, and it could be, to me, it would be you know, a plus point to see if the effort was Sedgwick County, for instance, and you know, Wichita and Bel Air and Goddard and, you know, Winfield or something, you know, the surrounding communities or entities within those that sharing some of this money come together to work on an effort. It would be exciting to partner with those type of efforts going forward. Other questions, Krista or Alyssa, or thoughts?
I don't think we have any additional thoughts on this pillar 1.
Okay. Well, then let's move to pillar 2.
Okay.
That's
Awesome.
in the documents that Connie sent out.
Yes, so pillar 2 is a little bit different, mainly because in conversations, especially I believe in the last meeting, Pat, I think you said it perfectly, you know, recognizing the urgency, wanting to get dollars out there, but also appreciating and wanting to take the time to be strategic and really think through these things. So what you see here on pillar 2 is what I have called getting started. So what does it really look like to continue that brainstorming process? There are some basic things on here. You'll see instead of a process like in pillar 1, we put in here what we think the board may like to engage in on an annual basis, to where you are learning about opportunities, you're learning about needs, in multiple different ways. You assess information you have gathered, and then you are able to set those priorities for this pillar 2, and then work through what those grant opportunities and funding opportunities look like. The next part here is considerations for scaling evidence-based practices. So I know Pillar 2 is not solely about only evidence-based practices, but it is about this multi-year investments and how do we really create system change and how do we really find what sustainability could look like in these type of projects. And so these are just different considerations that we put in here in terms of that these types of projects typically are most successful when they have a strong ecosystem of support. So not only is the multi-year funding really important, but high quality ongoing training, technical assistance, and then the idea of communities of practice to where we are bringing organizations together that are working towards the same goals to learn from each other, to continue their learnings. And so just some considerations under this pillar in ways in which this could support the board's overall goal of these being sustainable multi-year investments that create systems change. And for next steps on this one, recognizing that the conversations have not occurred and we're really still trying to find time to discuss these things, recommend focusing on potentially releasing funding opportunities through Pillar 1, which you guys just discussed, that responsive program, or potentially Pillar 3. And then we have included different options here to continue brainstorming, really just from hearing you guys last meeting. So you'll see here, there's kind of, I think we could do any number of ways, but the idea being that, us as staff could meet with stakeholders, agencies to better understand what best strategies could come forth and bring those for review. We could continue moving forward with bringing forth top recommendations from the needs assessment and just ongoing conversations Krista and I have as the landscape has changed very rapidly since the release of that. Bring those forth for more conversation, and then also being able to leverage future discussion with stakeholders or inviting organizations. This last bullet here is just kind of giving a nod to the past funding you guys have done, and I know that you have expressed interest in hearing those success stories as well.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Alyssa? Alyssa and Krista, you would be well situated as you're looking at the grants as they come in or proposals to piece together, it seems like. I still go back to several meetings ago. I think it was Sandra that we're, approving RFPs, and she just made kind of a quick comment about, oh, this organization, I wish they knew about, one that we had approved a couple items before they could work together. And that just has stuck with me that, yeah, that's what we want to encourage. And so what you just presented here as next steps, would encourage you to do that. And also the board, as you're out and about, if you see or hear of initiatives going forward that you feel that, oh, maybe this could be something that KFAB could be involved with, you can reach out to Alyssa or Krista or bring it to a board meeting to encourage some collaboration as we go forward.
Yeah, that's a great point, Pat. And just to clarify a little bit, so Krista and I are definitely thinking, continuing the conversation on priorities, but once those priorities have been selected, we would come back to you guys with similar frameworks that you saw for Pillar 1, to where, what does it look like potentially for a targeted grant program to begin? What does it look like for RFPs around scaling? Is there an option in which organizations are able to say, hey, I would like to come talk to the board, or the board would like to invite organizations to come? I think those things are coming, and we can definitely continue to explore those, but really kind of trying to move forward with the brainstorming session, just trying to keep our momentum on that. But we do see this fleshing out the same way that you saw for the first pillar.
And I would anticipate these especially if they're multi-year, that these grants, again, depending upon what each of them are, but if there's 6 entities that have teamed up to go forward and it's 2 or 3 years that we would be able to award a larger grant that maybe would be split out over a number of years. Other questions or comments? Well, thanks for that, and then we'll look forward to at the next board meeting some more specific guidelines to look at, and we'll move
that
on
sounds
to
good.
Pillar 3.
Yes, so for Pillar 3, our innovation-focused initiatives. So we are back to, you see your purpose, core components, process, and then summary here. So this is the idea this is the framework we're bringing forth for the idea if the board was interested in issuing innovation challenge RFPs. So the purpose of these would be to issue a challenge question, a really big question to the field, and then it allows the field to say, hey, this is how we think we would do it, and really use that creativity and innovation to meet that question. I think, Pat, like you said, perfect example is how do we help someone reach 1 year of recovery? To me, that's like a really big challenge question. There's so many ways to do that, and so the framework kind of envisions if the board was interested in pushing that out, what this process could look like. We included here some core components of what these RFPs probably should focus on. So there is that collaborative focus, so the expectation that there is going to be collaboration with a diverse range, especially I think because the questions will be really difficult. We do not anticipate anyone will be able to really solve them on their own. Comprehensive support, so the idea that any challenge question that would be included in an RFP, we would want to speak to the expectation to consider how wraparound services are going to be provided. So not just necessarily saying that innovation will focus on treatment, but whatever the question is, I know that in the past meetings we have, there's been discussions around how do we ensure that no matter what we fund, we're encouraging our awardees to make those linkages to care, to housing, to food, to other resources, and then how are they also going to be working with the family unit? So the way that plays out in the individual RFPs would be more specific, but wanting to give a nod that this would be a core component in any innovation challenge that may be issued. And then the third one here is just stigma reduction. So recognizing that, as Pat has said many times, that is one of the greatest barriers in this area for a multitude of reasons. And so wanting to give a nod to there would be some expectation that any applicant or awardee would be focused on stigma in some way and would be able to articulate that to us. For the process here, this process looks different and is really just built on the idea of that innovation is taking a higher risk and that we do want the board to have the opportunity to be engaged in this process as much as possible. So you'll see here in the process, there are multiple different presentations that occur. So the idea being that the RFP is released and the RFP would be a smaller form of an application. So trying to just get some rough ideas of how people are proposing to answer the question. That would lead to them coming in front of the board and having a presentation, a short one of, hey, here's the concept, here's what we're thinking. And then as board members, you would be able to ask those questions and decide, okay, we would like to move forward with some of these. What do we really want to do there? After that presentation, we are considering this a proof of concept period. The idea being that we would, staff would be working really closely with like learning labs and like learning collaboratives of, hey, okay, let's bring in experts. Like, let's really try and help these organizations with their ideas to flush them out in a way that like can really get them to a good place. And so this proof of concept period is really meant to do that. So we have close alignment as staff and really are just supporting them and creating it versus, okay, cool, come back to us in 3 months, we'll see you then. So after that, there would be a full proposal presentation to the board where they would provide their entire fleshed out concept. what they're proposing, what they're thinking. And at that point, the board could decide, you know, love that idea. We would love to see what this looks like. We want you to get started on it, which would put them into a pre-implementation phase. This is really an area in which we recognize that having an idea and then having that idea come to life requires time. So we really envision this pre-implementation phase as the time to allow organizations to create those MOUs, to form, you know, any internal processes that are needed for their project. Really give them that window of opportunity where providing a service or providing and doing the actual implementation of their project is not expected, because they really probably do need to do a lot of work up front. So after that, we would continue having them come in front of the board to do presentations, provide updates on how that is going. And then that would lead them into a full implementation, evaluation, and sustainability phase, in which they would continue to engage with the board, but this is really where we begin to envision them implementing their full project, exactly what they envisioned.
And I might just add with the process, the way we're thinking about it is, since this bucket is a little, or pillar, not bucket, is more risky, it would be good for the board to make sure and be, obviously we want to be really involved and collaborative, but have that opportunity to reconsider if it needs to continue or not, because if they're not successful, or if maybe we're going in a different direction and or something happens at the state, we're not tied to 5 years of something that may not be impactful. And so continuing to have those kind of almost reapplication periods where you're reconsidering these along the way is where you're seeing those presentations, so that we can help manage some of that risk and also be involved and continue to hear from them about what they're doing and provide feedback.
Very good. The layout, I want to, invite all the board to comment, but go to Gary first. This is kind of in your wheelhouse of what you do on a daily basis. Taking these risks and the way that you, look at them along the way. Does this seem appropriate? Anything that might add or?
Yeah, I had one clarifying question, and that is, in your mind, when we send out the innovation challenge question, is it one question, or are we sending out 4 or 5 questions all simultaneously?
I think we could do either or. My preference, I have at least 3 questions, I think, in my head, but it's one larger question with things that are a piece of it. So if you're thinking about what you'll see on the other document of the 1 year of recovery, how do we also maybe integrate some kind of hub concept and shame and stigma, like Pat has been mentioning, and certain things. So there might be sub-questions, I guess, within there, but if you all have thoughts on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I guess my initial thought on that is I would like to send out more questions than less. And to Pat's point, like if you think about this as a venture capital fund that's going to, invest in various entities, we're going to know relatively quickly, it'd be my guess, that a couple of them stand out and a couple of them won't. And the ones that won't, if we funded them, we need to decide that we're going to fail fast and cut them off and move on. And the ones that do have some sort of significant efficacy, then I would argue that then they need to keep coming back to us. And my guess is we'll have to fund more over time. So my preference would be to have 3, 4, 5, challenge questions come out all at once, and then we can assess which one of them we feel more strongly about and try and give them enough capital to be able to succeed. Is that helpful, or is that counter to where some of the other board members were thinking?
Gary, this is Robin. I like that
Gary,
approach. Go ahead.
See, Robin first and then Sandra.
I was thinking the same thing as we were going through this pillar, that if it's a question, and there may be organizations that have a great thought or beginnings of a plan, but it doesn't nail that question, they're excluded, at least for that cycle. So I love the idea of multiple questions.
Great.
Yeah, this is Sandra. I appreciate that as well. I just wanted to share a conversation that I had this week that relates to this. The CPPR folks have been out and around presenting a lot about the needs assessment in various venues, and they were in a local Rotary Club this week. And I got a lot of feedback about, because folks know I'm on the board, how is the board going to use this information to inform funding opportunities? And at least here, people are watching a little bit more than I thought they would be. And so I'm just curious how, especially in the innovation side and coming up with these challenge questions, how do we capture some of those challenge questions from the results of the needs assessment? And I know we all have various opinions about the entirety of that assessment, but how we're connecting what we're doing, what we're asking for, what we're hoping people come to us with back to that process so that we can connect those dots for the community. So I just wanted to throw that out there, Krista, for just something to think about as we continue to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. That is something I have been considering, Sandra, and I think there's a few ways to do it. The one thing that comes to top of mind, I think potentially when we release these opportunities to the public, we ourselves include a section saying, hey, this is information from the needs assessment. This is where our thoughts come from. We could do a call out in that way for sure, because I think you're correct. We do want to do those connections, and honestly, I feel like a lot of what we have is directly connected to that. We just may not be expressly communicating that in that specific way.
And Sandra, just to your point, to let people know, I mean, we spend a lot of money and time with that needs assessment. In general, we are taking their, that information that was presented to us, that does play into decisions that we're making. So maybe we need to communicate that better, to Alyssa's point.
Can I ask?
Go ahead, Gary.
Thanks, Pat. One other question. When you say send out notifications to the field, what does that mean? And in this particular pillar, it feels to me like the field is broader and more, it's not traditional, potentially.
Yes, I think for moving forward with this pillar, we would, as staff, we would really think about new ways to make sure this information is getting out to people. The way I was referring to it was just in general, whenever we post opportunities. And so I think the board has discussed how that process could, and should be improved. So we are making sure that people are aware of these opportunities who don't consider them as part of the field or really are those non-traditional partners. So my instinct is to say that we would honestly, if this was the direction the board wanted to move forward with, come back and say, here are the specific ways that we are thinking we are going to try and get this information out. And then the board could provide feedback. You guys could give us some information, be like, hey, we think you should be connected to these people. We would want to definitely have that input in there, but we could definitely come back with more detail. So if that, I guess it feels more like of a specific plan in ways we intend to reach those people.
And then to dovetail onto that, I believe we are still constrained that we can only work with not-for-profits. Is that correct?
I think we're developing. I don't know if we've crossed the line yet, Chris.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on the final approval on the amendment, but I think we can proceed as if we were able to work with for-profits. I think that's more of a technical step at this stage.
That's great to hear. I just wanted to know whether the field had been broadened out or not. Thank you.
Yeah, and this would be a good, who knows, people in Pillar 3 could be 2 nonprofits and 3 for-profits and,
yes,
a couple government agencies. And I would encourage the board, if you think of entities, we have approached the policymakers, I guess, with the Rural Health Transition Fund several times, and I think Alyssa staying close to them, reminding them that, hey, we have funds, and part of what they're charged with is making a difference when it comes to SUD challenges out there, and there might be other entities, of course, with the Kansas Health Foundation. We've met with Ed a few times, and there might be some collaboration we can do with. And then I was just thinking a couple of days ago, just for example, that I've met the current drug czar, the Office of ONDCP, I think. I can't remember what that all stands for, that acronym, but the federal entity. And so I thought, well, could reach out to her, the drug czar, and just say, we've got this going on here in Kansas. In fact, every state, you have any initiatives, perhaps we could play a part of that. So I say all that just to encourage the board, if you come across entities, public or private, that might be, good to encourage them to, especially with this innovation. Other comments?
Pat, if I may jump in, back to Sandra's question, just for the benefit of the public and the record. When we're thinking about the pillars and the entire approach to the pillars, that also is kind of informed by the needs assessment and aligns specifically with what the needs assessment recommends, in the sense of how funds should go out the door, not the specific topics, but there is needed to be a mix of funding that are short-term so that you can test things and meet immediate needs, but also longer-term grants for sustainability, because that's a big gap, and then this room for innovation and whatnot. So the entire pillar framework itself is informed by the needs assessment. So I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hey, Pat.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, as a former provider, I retired now, if I got my hands on these documents that we're producing, I think I would be very excited. And I think these are, wonderfully done. But I think this really does have a chance to stimulate our existing providers who, lots of times just get stuffed into sort of a box, and I'm kind of thinking, well, this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way the funding source wants it. But this opens up a lot of flexibility for providers, and I think that's very promising. So,
thank you. And hopefully we do is just to provide, we have some funds that would encourage people to think outside the box. And that's a good point, Ken, that, as a provider, maybe we discourage instead of encourage thinking outside the box. So hopefully we can do some of that.
Yep.
I know that I had some examples of on pillar one. Krista or Alyssa, do you have any other examples just to throw out there to shape our thinking, or to broaden
definitely.
our
So these other examples come from thinking about there are different ways in which grant making can occur. So with Pillar 1, as previously discussed, a responsive grant program where people are filling out something short, able to come to the board, express those needs. This separate one that is labeled Bridging SUD Treatment RFP is an example of how an RFP process could potentially occur under Pillar 1. And so this is an example of, if the board was interested in moving forward with it, it allows to meet some of the ongoing critical need for service expansion, and also allows for a soft launch of the due diligence process for for-profit entities. Core components here that we listed just as some examples, applicant organizations must be certified by KDADS to provide treatment. RFP strategies that would be included in here could be adapted from the previous treatment RFPs and something that maybe the board would like to tailor more towards the spirit and the initiative of Pillar 1. Again, collaboration remains a really strong point here, and the sticking in theme with Pillar 1, considering that these awards would not be renewable. I did give a nod here thinking about how all these different pillars can interact with each other. I think that if there was a desire of, hey, in Pillar 1, we did fund something through an RFP, that could be a really great opportunity to scale it after we see results. I think then, that's where we begin to imagine, what does it look like in Pillar 2? Or potentially it leads to something really innovative, or it's a desire to go into the innovative category and say, hey, okay, we're getting this idea from something we funded in Pillar 1. So it does give that nod of the idea of the project itself wouldn't be non-renewable, it wouldn't be able to be funded again, but thinking about that specific issuance of funds in of itself wouldn't be. The process would be the same way that the previous RFPs have gone out, and then you'll see here similar next steps if this was a consideration that just are, I think, very similar to considerations that were included for other RFPs. So grant limits, budgets, any application questions on the RFP that would want to be added. So this is an example of how an RFP could occur for Pillar 1.
Very good. Questions or comments? You mentioned KDAD, and I was trying to find it here, that maybe I didn't quite understand that KDAD has a list of approved providers, or refresh my memory.
They certify, and maybe Sandra or Jason should speak to this over me, but they certify all of our SUD treatment facilities in the state. And so I have a list. I don't know if it's the most up-to-date list, but we could ask them for that, and we would just cross-reference of any applicant organization, making sure that they are KDAD certified. Jason or Sandra, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, this is Sandra. Correct, Krista. And there's a list out on the KDAD's website that they update periodically. But anyone who says they provide any level of substance use treatment has to be licensed by the state, for profit or nonprofit.
Thank you. Which makes sense, even if it's a new startup, it doesn't matter if you're a barber or chiropractor or SUD provider. The state provides that regulatory service. I don't think that hinders it. Actually just gives us a level of confidence that if they're on that list. Is that the right way to look at it, Sandra?
I'm shaking my head. I don't know if you can see me, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments or questions for Krista or Alyssa? Very good. I would like to, Krista and Alyssa, or anything else you want to throw out there to the board before I bring up an item for consideration?
Maybe just, I don't know if we want to go over the example of the innovation challenge question, or since we mentioned having multiple questions, if you'd prefer we just come back with examples of 4 or 5 different questions, or maybe more than that you all could pick from at the next meeting, rather than discussing that one specifically today, or if you just want to hear an overview.
Let's get an overview, and then that'll help us, and then we'll spend more time with the 4 or 5 questions next time.
Yeah, and so Gary, I think this kind of, when you asked your question, I thought about this piece. So this is an example of some key pieces to where if the board was to issue the question, how do we help people achieve 1 year of recovery? The board could decide in that whatever the RFP or whatever, putting that question out to the field would look like, could include core components saying, okay, we want you to be innovative, we want you to be creative. However, we know there are some best practices and there are things that as a board we're really invested in. So you could include those as core components, and these are just some examples. And some of these are taken from previously in the last meeting, Ken had shared his example around how he had seen this done previously. And so the core components here incorporated the idea of things that were really core to what made that example successful. So a designated peer, case manager, community health worker is included in there. Another key piece was a comprehensive team-based assessment. So this just really illustrates that the board could decide, hey, here's a question. There are specific things, though, that we want you to consider or to include. And then the background there is just information on why the board is interested in this question. And I think that is where we could definitely give a nod to the needs assessment and call that out specifically as well. And then if the board was interested in this opportunity, there's just those next steps there at the bottom.
And then, Alyssa, if we discuss this, maybe I missed it, but we talked a little bit about putting a cap on pillar one and expanding that cap. In this case, if I'm going to go to a lot of work to come up with some sort of innovative strategy, or I already have an innovative strategy, but I need to know that if I throw my team on it, am I going to get enough capital to make it worth my while to do the work? How do we think about a cap on this strategy when it could be so wide ranging?
Yes. So in an effort to provide really clean one-pagers to you guys, we created these, and then I forgot to mention that I have a lot of detailed notes on how a process in this pillar could work. And so there are, at the various stages, when presentations to the board occur, it unlocks those dollars to allow for organizations to have those dedicated resources. So for example, they would, after an organization would provide like a short application, or hey, we're interested, hey, we have an idea, they would come in front of the board, potentially have 5 to 10 minutes to talk about their idea. The idea being that if the board was interested in seeing that go into the proof of concept phase, they would be awarded a certain amount of dollars in which they could begin to pull their staff, pull resources to do that proof of concept. And then that continues down the process to where in implementation, they're really unlocking and being funded a larger amount to get that work done.
So I should think of it as like acceleration of capital given to them over a period of time if they hit proof of concept.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in the way we're thinking about it.
Good.
And to Gary's point, I think it would be motivating if we did put some amounts. We don't have to do that today, but you might think of for our next meeting to, so it would send the message considering this that, okay, to get to the proof of concept, there's the grants could be up to 500,000 or $1 million. And if we get past that, it could be up to 5 million. I'm just making up these numbers, but I've always envisioned that these awards would be in that scope because of all the work that would be necessary. And, I even anticipate that they would need to actually hire somebody that every day is making sure this thing goes forward after proof of concept. So to award 5 million over 5 years, that just sends a message that, okay, it's worth putting in the time and effort to develop this. So maybe we could discuss that further at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we could give some examples. I think right now it's probably easy to give examples of that proof of concept period being like setting a number amount. Maybe it's 25 to 50,000 just so that they can have staffing dedicated to completing a proposal and attending our learning labs or whatever we end up calling them. So for that actual staff time to build their full proposals, we're actually helping them and with funding, but then also helping them and supporting how they will actually write that proposal and having experts help them and also helping each other and networking during those events. So a smaller amount for that. And It might be more difficult, I guess, to get to what a number might look like for the overarching challenge question for what pre-implementation or implementation might look like, but we can try to throw some numbers out there. But I think that proof of concept period also gives us some time to work with those entities that are selected and kind of see what their plans are looking like and potential budgets. And then maybe the board could have a much clearer idea of what it would cost or what it would take to get to those. Yeah, we can definitely do our best to come up with something next meeting as well.
And I would encourage you to, obviously Gary does this every day, so he could probably bring some practical experience. I'm also thinking back to my days when I was on the KBA, the Kansas Bioscience Authority. There was some people there that I came across that had, very much this was what they were challenged with doing, and there is both for-profit and nonprofits involved. So I'll try to get some names to you that might be resources as we develop these parameters. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, I would like to throw out board, and then Krista or Alyssa, you can go into a little bit more detail. The entity that came to us with the transitional housing units for women, and the only reason I bring this up is just that I know it's time sensitive, so I wanted to give the board an opportunity if we wanted to consider this specific request, we could that today, but if it's not the will of the board, no problem there either.
Pat, this is Sandra. Have you seen that? I'm looking at my emails and I don't see a request.
I think the request just came into Krista and Alyssa, and then we've had some discussion as we put together the agenda about it, and it just struck me that, okay, let's throw it out to the board, and if the board's interested, and Alyssa can go into more detail about this, again, only because the clock's ticking on this, but it's if the board does not feel like that's appropriate, that's fine too.
I will say we didn't send it out because we weren't sure, since the responsive grant making process hasn't been established, how that would go best. And so that's why it did not go out, because we weren't sure that it would be even an option.
Give us an overview again of the project, and then the board can decide if we want to consider it or not.
I can do that. Yeah. So the amount, again, which may have gone down by now, it's been a couple of weeks, was $36,949.50. That was remaining to get to the goal of unlocking that $300,000 for a 10-unit transitional housing project in Douglas County at First Step of Lakeview and the property in Lawrence. They would prioritize pregnant and parenting women. They have construction scheduled to be complete in the summer of 2026. Again, that deadline for the challenge grant of $300,000 is December 31st. These 10 units would be tailored, like I said, for women and their children, and they'd have access to the treatment services such as intensive outpatient treatment. They'd help them pursue educational objectives. They'd be encouraged to seek and secure employment, and they'd be providing those supports around there. Their proposal also kind of talks about their property ownership and whatnot. They would be limited to Douglas County residents. And then they also break down the project budget and what they've secured so far. They've raised 91% of the total project costs already to date. And this specific request is for that $36,000 to unlock the $300,000. Any questions?
Questions?
So Sandra, DECA is the requesting entity, right?
Correct.
And just my comment, why it caught my attention, is that this is by far the hardest group to find housing for women with children. It's hard to get treatment for them. Quite a few women that find themselves in this situation. They're trying to get clean and they have kids and they're, need this transitional housing. So there's obviously a need for it. But again, if the board feels like, being rushed or we don't have time to respond to it, that's certainly appreciated too. But if the board felt so inclined, I think we have the authority to move forward. Leave it to the board.
I guess I would just say $36,000 on 300 million is nothing. And any entity that has raised capital that needs a match, that feels like they're doing something right. I don't know any details, obviously, but they're clearly doing something right if they're getting capital from other entities that trigger this particular match.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think it's also a good test of our board, whether under like pillar one, whether we can actually respond in a time sensitive projects like this. I hope we'll take this up.
Yeah, this is Sandra. I support that for lots of reasons. And we have set a precedent to do this fairly quickly. We, responded to the Attorney General's ask a few months ago, very similarly. So we have done this previously.
Well, I would take a motion then.
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
Gary moves, Mike seconds. Any further discussion to approving the grant to the for the transitional housing in Douglas County with the maximum about in 36,950 if the grant to reach the goal of 300. If it's less than that, that will be what we'll provide. So I don't know if that's too wordy for the people that have to, Connie mainly keeping track. Feel free to change or shorten. With no further comment, all in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Have a unanimous approval of that request.
Chair, just a quick question for you. Could we get the name of who actually made the motion? I think we had a little confusion on our side.
Gary made the motion and Mike seconded.
I think technically it was Ken that seconded it.
Oh, okay, Ken.
Yeah, I won that race.
Thank you.
I concede.
I think we're done with everything. Alyssa, Krista, anything else you want to bring before the board?
No, just that we will come back next meeting with a lot more details on things we discussed.
Sounds good. To the board, any further comments or suggestions?
Just want to thank everybody for continuing to move things along.
Yes, it feels good. Feels like we're getting, more and more zoned into the exciting part of what our efforts will be in the future. Appreciate the staff and just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And January 9th is our next meeting. We'll plan on being at the State House. I didn't look up the legislative calendar. I can't remember the date that the legislature comes back. I think it's the second week of January, so they might or might not be in session yet. But sometime while they are in session, would like to invite certain committee chairs, the Attorney General, obviously, and just have them come over and maybe do a Q&A and inform them on our efforts to date. So I look forward to that sometime this between January and April.
Mr. Chair,
Merry Christmas. And
Mr. Chair, just so you have the information for you, the legislature comes back on the 12th and our next meeting would be on January 9th.
Okay, so we'll be ahead. Maybe in February we'll invite some of them over. Thank you, Chris. So with that, we are adjourned.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.